Welcome to WhiskyCast, cask strength conversation featuring news and interviews from the world of whiskey. I'm Mark Gillespie. This is episode number 1062 for June 23rd, 2024. Coming up in a few minutes.
The whiskey from here will not be a carbon copy of the whiskey from up there. They will be similar, but they will not be identical. So that's going to be really interesting to see, like, do we ultimately bring out a Heaven Hill Springs Bottle and Bond or a companion set or something like that. So there's cool stuff that we'll be able to do with that.
Earlier this week, I was one of the first journalists allowed to tour the new Heaven Hill Springs Distillery in Bardstown, Kentucky. It's scheduled to open later this year and will supplement Heaven Hill's existing capacity at Bernheim Distillery in Louisville by 10 million proof gallons a year at first. Master Distiller Conor O'Driscoll is our tour guide later on WhiskyCast In-Depth. I'll also have the What I'm Tasting This Week department, behind the label, and much more. The news is next on this week's WhiskyCast.
Gabriel Cardarella from Jewers here. The 2024 U.S. Open Championship may have ended, but you can still get your hands on the whiskey created to honor it. The new Jewers 19-Year-Old Champions Edition. Trust me, a whiskey you don't want to miss. More details coming up.
And now, a message from Robin Redbreast.
A thoughtful gift is hard work. What you need is a go-to multi-purpose gift for all occasions. A bottle of Redbreast can say, "Enjoy every minute, they grow up so fast." Oh. And equally nails, "Apologies for the back pain, I should have just hired a moving company."
Proud sponsor of WhiskyCast. Redbreast. Pass it on.
Let's get started with the week's news. It's brought to you by the Dalmore. The Kentucky Bourbon Trail is marking its 25th anniversary this year, and the Kentucky Distillers Association is launching an all-new digital experience online to help visitors prepare for their Bourbon Trail trip. The experience includes a build-your-own Bourbon Trail program to let visitors decide what's most important to them, then presents them with a slate of distilleries, hotels, and restaurants that match their choices. There's also another major change for the Bourbon Trail. It'll no longer be split into a trail for the big distilleries and a separate trail for craft distillers, but will instead be one statewide Bourbon Trail spanning 46 distilleries. More than 18 million people have toured the Bourbon Trail in its 25 years. Justins House of Bourbon stores in Louisville and Lexington have settled their case with state regulators more than a year after the Kentucky ABC accused the vintage bourbon retailer of violating state laws. The owners agreed to pay $60,000 in fines and admit to the allegations in order to avoid having their liquor licenses revoked. They were accused of failing to report purchases of vintage spirits to the state as required by law, along with buying whiskeys that don't qualify as vintage spirits because they're still being made. The accusations also claim that Justins illegally shipped bourbons to its Washington, D.C. warehouse to then ship directly to consumers to get around a Kentucky ban on interstate shipments. Owners Justin Sloan and Justin Thompson said in a Facebook post Friday that the settlement gives them a resolution that allows them to move forward with a clear conscience. The International Whisky Competition handed out its annual awards this week. Altmore Oloroso Sherry Cask 25-year-old, a global travel retail exclusive, won the Golden Barrel Trophy for Whiskey of the Year. It leads a sweep for Bacardi of the top awards, including Distiller of the Year and a sixth consecutive Master Blender of the Year award for Stephanie McLeod of Dewar's. George T. Stagg won Best American Whiskey and Best Bourbon honors, while Cavalan's Distillery Reserve Peated Single Malt won Best World Whiskey honors. We have a link to a complete list of award winners in the show notes for this episode at whiskycast.com. Bonham's Skinner wrapped up its June auction of rare whiskeys this week, with sales totaling more than $700,000. Two lots tied for the high bid honors, a Highland Park 50-year-old and the 1967 Glenlivet Winchester collection, each brought high bids of $21,250. In other news, Heaven Hill introduced its new grain-to-glass collection of whiskeys Tuesday night in Bardstown. The collection features a straight bourbon, a straight wheated bourbon, and a rye whiskey, and all of the corn used in the first editions was grown across the road from Heaven Hill's Bardstown campus. Bernard Peterson of Peterson Farms grew the grain for the grain-to-glass whiskeys.
First off, words escape me. It's it's always a joy to work on a project and bring it to the consumer level, to the end. And this project is such a joy. We were blessed to be able to do some trials about a month ago, and I think when you get a taste of this project and these tastings, you'll really understand what I'm saying. It's so much fun. It's unique. It gives us a baseline for what we're going to do. Some of the baseline for some of the, I think, research we need to do in the bourbon industry as to how different cultivars affect the flavor of bourbon.
The collection will be an annual release, with this year's bottles priced at $100 each. I'll have my tasting notes for them later on, and we'll have more on the Grain to Glass collection in the Behind the Label segment. Other new whiskeys of note, Jim Beam is relaunching its Jim Beam Black Bourbon with a new recipe and a 7-year-old age statement. It carries a recommended retail price of $24.99 a bottle. Wyoming Whiskey has 2 new Wyoming-only releases. This year's batch of Outrider features a new recipe with a 51% rye whiskey. Longtime listeners will recall that original master distiller Steve Nally snookered his bosses with a 49% rye blended with bourbon because he didn't like rye whiskey. That's been changed with this batch. There's also a new Independence Rock release that's 8 years old. It celebrates the landmark pioneers used to gauge their journey west through the prairie. Both will be available exclusively at Wyoming retailers. Iowa's Cedar Ridge Distillery has released a new Amontillado sherry cask-finished bourbon. It takes Cedar Ridge's flagship bourbon and finished it in a first-fill Amontillado butt for a total of 4.5 years of maturation. Look for it at a recommended retail price of $59.99 a bottle. Texas's Milam and Green Distillery has released the 3rd edition in its Wildlife Collection series. Cardinal Single Barrel Bourbon honors the birds of Texas and was matured for a total of 8 years and almost 2 months. Only 130 bottles will be available at a price of $149.99 each. From Scotland, Glenglassaugh Distillery has released the Serpentine Cask Collection, 3 individual single cask bottlings that are 48, 49, and 51 years old. The 48-year-old was finished in an Aleatico red wine barrique and will sell in the U.S. for $7,700 a bottle. The 49-year-old spent its entire life in an ex-bourbon barrel and will sell for $8,600 each. And the 51-year-old was finished in an Oloroso puncheon and carries an $11,000 price tag. Bangalore is known as the home of India's Amrit single malts, but Bangalore Airport's duty-free shop is getting Paul John's initial duty-free release. It's a single-cask Madeira matured single malt priced at $300 a bottle. And Italy's Puni Distillery is releasing the 5th edition in its Puni Arte series. Arte 5 is matured in ex-Isla Scotch whiskey casks for 6.5 years. Just 2,830 bottles will be available at a price tag of €90 each. You can keep up with the latest whiskey news all week long at WhiskyCast.com and in the WhiskyCast community app. The news is brought to you by the Dalmore.
Hello, Richard Patterson here, Master Distiller, Master Blender for the Dalmore. You know, whenever the team and I are in the world sharing our exceptional single malt, we like to keep in touch with Mark Gillespie and the latest news from WhiskyCast.
Let's check the calendar and see what's happening around the world of whiskey. Uncle Nearest founder Fawn Weaver's Love and Whiskey book tour continues this week with stops in Chicago on Tuesday, Birmingham, Alabama on Thursday, Indianapolis on Saturday, and next Sunday at the Nearest Green Distillery in Shelbyville, Tennessee. Whiskies of the World takes place this Saturday in Nashville, Tennessee, and Waterford Distillery's annual festival day is also on Saturday in Waterford, Ireland. Cask Share has a tasting of rare whiskies at its offices in Edinburgh, Scotland on July 3rd. July 6th is the Bristol Whiskey Festival in Bristol, England, and Bourbon's Bistro in Louisville hosts an RD1 Spirits Bourbon Dinner on July 11th. If you're organizing a whiskey event, let us know about it. We'll add it to the calendars at WhiskyCast.com and in the WhiskyCast community app.
And now, a message from Robin Redbreast.
Kentucky and Ireland have plenty in common. 2 homes of horse racing, Bluegrass music is said to have Irish roots. Okay, it's not the longest list, but the Redbreast Kentucky Oak Edition only strengthens the bond. Finished in sustainably sourced Kentucky oak for a captivating nose and round taste. I see a triple crown in this thoroughbred's future.
Proud sponsor of WhiskyCast. Redbreast. Pass it on.
WhiskyCast In-Depth is brought to you by Lagavulin and the Classic Malts lineup. Work continues on the new Heaven Hill Springs Distillery in Bardstown, Kentucky, and progress is coming along rapidly, with the distillery scheduled to open later this year. This week I was one of the first outsiders allowed inside the construction site for a hard hat tour, with Master Distiller Conor O'Driscoll as our tour guide.
We broke ground here almost exactly 2 years ago. It was a cornfield up until that point, and you can see how much we've got done. Jack and Bernie and I were talking how about a year ago you guys were here. It's changed a little, and we will be ready to be in production within about 5 or 6 months. So some of the facts around this is a 10 million proof gallon facility. We've laid it out for 3 phases. Each phase is 10 million proof gallons, 150,000 barrels. So phase 1 now, and as demand increases, phase 2, phase 3. We will use live yeast here. We'll see a lot of the yeasting infrastructure. I'm pretty excited about that. Starting up, we will start up on the HH Reg mash bill, 78, 10, 12 corn rye malt. We will eventually make all the mash bills, but it's going to be complex enough starting up this beast without messing with mash bills. So it'll be reg to start with. On the back side, which we may or may not have time to see, we've got the boiler room, utility room, and a dry house, full dry house. We might take a spin through there if we've got time. But the tanks we saw being built on the way in are distillate tanks. The distillate from here will be tankered to the existing cistern room. Barrels will be filled there. As we expand production here, ultimately we'll build a cistern room here and fill all the barrels here. But that's some years down the road. So, all right, so grain trucks will come in the same way we came in. They'll be weighed in. They'll pull back here, pull right in here. And this blue device on the left is a grain probe. We'll pull a sample out of every truck. We've learned a lot of design and operation lessons from the way Bernheim is laid out. The trucks back in at Bernheim and hit everything on their way in. So everything here is pulled through. It's designed for efficiency and just smart operation. So the probe will pull a sample, convey it to the operator in the grain lab over there. They'll test it for quality. Same way at Bernheim, every truck gets sampled. If it doesn't pass our quality control tests, we reject it. Not luckily, we've worked long and hard with great grain providers, partners, and we'll meet Bernard later on, who's one of them. They are into supplying high-quality grain to us. We are excited to partner with them. Can't make good whiskey from bad grain, so it literally starts there, which is, again, why we sample every single truck. Once the truck has been unloaded, as fast as gravity can empty the grain out of the truck, it'll fall in there and be conveyed up into the silos we just walked past. There's 2 for corn, 2 for malt, and 2 for small grains, rye or wheat. And again, starting up, it'll all be rye. Those bins and everything have been sized for phase 3. So we've got tons of unloading capacity, tons of storage capacity, and even when we get to phase 3, it'll take, but from the time a truck pulls in to pulls out here, will be somewhere between 12 and 15 minutes, and it takes about 45 minutes at Bernheim. So again, we've tried to learn our lessons, and even like if you can go downstairs here and walk around and access the machinery. So a lot of the thinking here has been, if I'm a mechanic or an operator or someone who's got to work on this, let's make it easy for that person. Because there's nothing worse than getting down in the sturdy, stinky pit and trying to change out a gearbox or something like that. Because it's all big equipment. Anyway, so that's a lot of the philosophy here. So let's go back out that way because they blocked the door. But anyway, the truck will pull out, be weighed out, and disappear. So from the truck, this device here is a cleaner. Scalps out any sticks, stones, that type of stuff. The clean grain then goes up the bucket elevator and is conveyed out into the silos again. 2 for corn, 2 for rye or wheat, 2 for malt. And then from there it's into the mill room. So we go this way. Not long. I mean, we will. It's all just in time. So we could pack these full and have probably 12 days worth of capacity, but we'll run them at whatever rate we're running. We'll maintain those levels for about a day or two. It is typical.
What lessons did you learn at Bernheim that are being figured into the construction of this one?
So all the grain unloading ones we just talked about there, efficiency, quick, in and out, not backing trucks in, and we'll talk a lot about it here with the milling operation. I mean, just engineer out known issues, engineer in efficiency, ease of access, safe operation, all that type of stuff. All right, so this is all of this stuff at Bernheim is up on the 7th floor. We've designed this system so it's down at grade. So again, if you're maintenance, you can access it easily. But what happens is the grain will be conveyed from the silos into the mill room here, and we'll see that in just a second. Blowers then convey the meal up to storage bins on top. The dirty air from that conveying system has got grain dust in it, comes back down to these bag houses. It's cleaned out of the air. And then that's blown back up to the storage silo, and ultimately the air is exhausted here. But again, clean, efficient operation, easily maintained, easily operated. Let's get out of the heat. And again, there are 3 systems: one for corn, one for malt, and one for small grains. Huh?
No, I was just saying, I can't think of a distillery operation this size with the opportunity to be purpose-built.
Yeah.
This day and age.
It's pretty cool.
There's nothing.
Not gonna lie. It's pretty. Yeah, a lot of we're not doing that. We're definitely not doing that. So this is the mill room. If you've ever been to Bernheim, the Bernheim mill room has pretty much all the same equipment in a room that's the height of that ceiling, and maybe about 3/4 of from that post over. And we've had to cram it in as Bernheim has grown. We've crammed bigger and bigger equipment in there, and it's real, 12 pounds of crap in about a 5-pound box. We built this one properly. So the grain from the silos is conveyed in on top. It'll drop into a surge hopper that feeds it into the mill that will sit up there. Then the meal will come down through these square holes here into the conveying system. It'll drop down. The blowers outside will blow it from this device all the way up to the top floor. Like these 2 big blue things up here, those are the motors for the mills. So that's the scale at which we're driving these machines. And again, design details, like see the way it's got the chain fall and the lifting beam? If we didn't have that, imagine trying to get that motor up there. So again, this has gone from conversation to drawings to 3D models to multiple reviews to this. It's been a very deliberate process, and it's a lot of very smart people, very passionate people have worked on this, and I think I'm really excited with how it's coming together.
How excited are you about this, getting this open?
Giddy. Just very, very giddy. The whole thing has been, it's been a passion project from day one. And it's just, every time I'm here, I'm like, oh yeah, this is awesome. And we'll start it up here in a few months, and the awesome will continue. So, all right, folks, this is the yeast room. Back in the corner here, we have the first 2 yeast tubs, basically 2 yeast tubs per phase. So you can kind of see the spots where phase 2 and phase 3 yeast tubs will go. In a moment, we'll walk through the mash floor, and then later we'll be upstairs and see the rest of the yeasting process. But these are the tanks where we will grow the yeast that will get transferred into the fermenter. So it's 1 tub per fermenter. And again, live yeast system. It starts in the lab, scale it up over several days. Ultimately, it'll grow in one of these tubs for 18-ish hours, 12 to 18 hours. And then it'll be transferred to the fermenter at the right point, ferment for 6 days, make great beer. At Bernheim, of course, we use dried yeast. There's nothing inherently wrong with one or the other, nothing inherently really better with one. Obviously, Bernheim has been making award-winning whiskeys for 25 years with dried yeast. There's nothing wrong with it. But my philosophy is if you think about it, the yeast makes all the alcohol, makes a lot of the flavors. The more control you have over that, the better. So in a live yeasting system, you are responsible for keeping the yeast happy and healthy all the way from a 250 ml flask in the lab to an 80,000 gallon fermenter. And you do it right, and the yeast is happy, the yeast is healthy, makes better beer, more alcohol. Both of those make better whiskey. So, and it's pretty cool when it works well. All right, let's cut through back to
where were the original
vial?
Where were the Jurassic Park vial?
So the original Jurassic Park fire was rescued. Our Jurassic Park vial was rescued from the fire at the original distillery, Cherry Picker. So Charlie Downs was sent up in a cherry picker to the second floor of the distillery. There was a jug of yeast in the fridge that he rescued. We now partnered with a company. No, the fire was over. It was the day after. Yeah. We didn't like Charlie. Get in there. The yeast is more important. Yeah. Do you want a story or do you want the facts? Because we could do both. So we partnered with a company called Fermentus that grows it and dries it for us. So we will either use the dry and start the cultures from that, or we own the yeast. It's our yeast. We'll get it from Fermentus as a frozen slant and start it from there. We trust them, but when we are growing our own yeast, it's a good question. When we're growing our own, we will routinely send it out for DNA analysis just to check. So
they do like to mutate every few generations. So yeah, it's a valid question.
You have a new generation every few hours.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, because we could stand here and literally talk yeast all day, right? So, Susan wrote a really, really good article in Whiskey Magazine, American Whiskey Magazine. But the number of generations, like in the lab, where we keep it alive, then from the lab to a 9-liter jug to a 100-gallon donut, into the yeast tub, from yeast tub to yeast tub, into the fermenter, there are thousands, hundreds of thousands of generations. So you get a mutation in there, like Sid said. All of a sudden, if you don't reintroduce fresh or manage it correctly, all of a sudden it's not Heaven Hill yeast, and you're making not Heaven Hill whiskey. So.
Your lab is at Bernheim?
No, it's upstairs. We'll see it momentarily.
What you're using now?
Yes. So Abby Long, I don't know, some of you may have met Abby. You're welcome to come help. Yeah. So Abby Long is QC specialist at Bernheim, and she and I worked at BF together and got a shared passion for doing yeast the right way. And she will kind of be leading the charge on getting the Jurassic Park ready for when we start. So some of that will be at Bernheim, and then as we... Huh? Exactly. Yeah. Nice. All right, cut through here. Nice theme. All right, so this is the mash floor. We have 2 yeast cookers and space for a third with the future phase, and we have 4 mash cookers. We'll only ever have 4 mash cookers. Taking the yeast cookers first, growing live yeast, it uses a different mash than the mash for the fermenters. It's basically got rye and malt in it and no corn. The goal in the yeast mashing and yeast propagation business is to get cells, not to get alcohol. So you're growing up the population, getting them conditioned to the conditions they're going to see in the fermenter, getting them active, getting them healthy. So when you do transfer the tub to the fermenter, the yeast basically see no difference. They hit the ground running, and they outcompete any other microbe that might want to get in there. We'll talk a little bit about lactic souring when we get upstairs, but this is all built around the sour mash process. 1 yeast cooker will make enough mash to fill 2 yeast tubs. Phase 1 is 2 fermenters a day, and so Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, basically. And we'll talk a bit more about the yeasting thing. Then the 4 tanks in a row here are our mash cookers. They are preparing mash for the fermenter. It's going to take 7 mashes to fill 1 fermenter. So, no, they're 80,000. We have 10 fermenters. We'll see them shortly. They are 80,000 gallons, which compares to the 124,000 gallon fermenters we have at Bernheim. With this phased approach, scaling and all that, it was easier to make smaller and just scale it up that way. The process here is the same at Bernheim. Water and backset go in, corn pre-malt, cook them, cool it, add the small grain, cool it, add the malt, and then from the cookers through our mash cooler. We've designed a lot of flexibility into this. We can run very thick beers, lots of grain per gallon of water, which makes the system more efficient, blah, blah, blah. And we've designed a lot of beef into this to make very thick beers, a very efficient system. The whole thing is automated, the whole thing. So basically this whole operation, when we're running, Sydney and 2 operators, assisted by 2 mechanics, will run the whole site. Distillery, dry house, grain, distillate loadout. So it's 100% automated. Yeah, per shift. We design it to be as close to whiskey on, whiskey off as possible. So super efficient. The cooks will transfer through the mash cooler. The point of the mash cooler is when you add the malt, the grain, the mash is at about 150 Fahrenheit. If you were to add the yeast to that, you'd kill the yeast and be out of business. So you want to cool it down to high 70s, low 80s as quickly as possible. There are benefits to malting and further conversion during fermentation. So it kind of doesn't look like much, but it's been designed specifically for this process. And it's a critical piece of the equipment here to get the mash from hot temperature to ambient temperature and into the fermenter. We can add the yeast and get to work.
How long does it take a full tub of mash to go through?
30 minutes. That actually was a design parameter. If you look at the kinetics of the malt enzymes dying, you got 45 minutes to an hour before it really gets impactful. So it's got to be done in 30 minutes. So we've got space there. So
yeast will also be going in line over there as well.
Well, on that, the strategy in starting up, like I said, we're not going to run multiple different mash bills. We're going to do HH Reg. We're not going to run the ultimate thick beer here day one. We'll start at something reasonable, get shit figured out, work our way into it, and optimize as we go forward. All right, let's go this way. We'll take a quick look at the still house. So this is the fermenter room. We have 10 fermenters and the beer well, and again, they're 80,000 gallons each. So the mash from the mash cooler, and we'll see all this upstairs when we get up there. But we'll basically start here and work our way around the room. We're planning to start up with all 6-day beers. So from the moment the mash goes in, we will run it for 6 days until we distill it. A typical 6-day beer at Bernheim has about 12-ish% alcohol in it. We expect the same here. Important to note, though, we're going to use the Heaven Hill yeast. We're going to use the same mash bills. The whiskey from here will not be a carbon copy of the whiskey from up there. They will be similar, but they will not be identical. So that's going to be really interesting to see, do we ultimately bring out a Heaven Hill Springs Bottle and Bond or a companion set or something like that. So there's cool stuff that we'll be able to do with that. But again, the goal here will be to make very high quality, very consistently high quality distillate that we'll make great aged whiskey from. Some of the cool stuff that I walked my daughter through here, 6 or 8 months ago, and she said, "Did you design all this?" I was like, "I have no idea how to do bricks or concrete or steel, but I worked on the process design." And one of the things I want to point out is I had a strong request that the floor should slope towards the drains, because you'd be amazed how many production facilities they put high point drains in, which don't work so well. So Nick Morris, who is the project manager on this, for Busick Construction. He's done so much to make our wishes and dreams come true. So if you look at the floors, they actually slope towards the drains, and they are trench drains, not one little spot. So again, it's designed for quality. It's designed to be easy to clean. It's designed to kind of keep itself clean as much as possible. So it's the little touches like that I think is really making the space special. I mean, all the big stuff is cool, but it's the nitty-gritty details like that I think will help set this apart. Other cool things to know is all the fermenters are identical, except for the 10 of them, there are 6 different nozzle layouts. If you look at the agitators, the yellow thing sticking off the side there, they're 12 feet in the air, so not very easy for a maintenance person to get to, but if you can drive a lift up to each one and get to it, so everything was laid out with that in mind. And when we get upstairs, you'll see how the nozzles are laid out, again, to get mash and everything else into the fermenter efficiently. So we had to go through, literally for the 10 identical tanks, there are 6 different layouts. So it's all these nitty-gritty little things that make it cool. All right, ready to go upstairs? All right, so if you're on the public tour, the staircase will come up there, you assemble there and come in this way. The first stop on the tour will be the yeast room. This will all be glassed in. We can see our 2 yeast tubs here. This small tank is the donut tub, and that room in there is the yeast lab. In the yeast lab, we will use a process called serial subculturing that keeps the yeast alive and keeps it happy and keeps it healthy, so that every time you transfer it to its next home, it's ready to go. So from a 250 ml flask in the lab, it'll go into a 9-liter jug. From a 9-liter jug, it'll go into the 100-gallon donut tub. So we've gone from metric to imperial, and we'll also go from a malt syrup-based media to a grain-based environment. So even from that size, we're getting it ready for life in a fermenter. From the donut, then one donut will set one tub. And then when the first tub is ready to be sent to the fermenter, we'll take a chunk of it and add it to the next tub. And then the second one will set the third one, and the third one, the fourth one, and so on. And then next week, we'll start with a fresh donut and begin the whole process again. So to our whole mutation and managing the culture, that's one way we do it. But again, literally the whole process is built around yeast life cycle. This is what drives. It's not like, oh, it's Sunday morning, 2:45. I don't feel like doing a yeast transfer. We're doing the yeast transfer because it all predicates on that. And when you get that right, wonderful things happen. Pushing for, I didn't have to push hard at all to bring live yeast back. Max Shapira, as soon as he literally asked me, would you rather do live yeast or dry yeast? I want to do live yeast. He goes, absolutely. And this is expensive, but dry yeast is too. But you build this once and you got it forever. But again, it's a really cool option for having maximum control over the quality of the whiskey that you make. Behind us, these 2 spaces are labs. The one on the right is quality control. The one on the left will be R&D. So if we're doing a new mash bill, or we want to trial a different fermenter temperature profile or whatever, we'll do that in there. Quality control is then pulling samples from the process, running them through an HPLC or a GCMS, whatever it might be, and testing that things are going as intended in the process. All right. We'll see, it still has away from the generator, but take a look in the door and you'll see the thumper. 4 mash cookers here and our 2 yeast tubs. When we get upstairs, we'll see all the meal handling stuff. It goes all the way up to the top of the building. But again, 7 mashes per fermenter. The yeast tub is down the other end. As we pump hot water or hot mash through the yeast cooler, there's 2 phases to it. There's city water cooling on one half and chilled water on the other. The cool city water coming in obviously gets heated up. We collect it in that tank, and that will make hot water available for the next cooks. And then the chilled water we just recirculate and keep it cold. But the city water will take out the bulk of the heat, and then the chilled water will bring it down to the exact temperature we need for fermentation. Huh? Oh, the lactic can, yes. So the other little 100-gallon tank in the back there, the third one in a row here, one of the things about running a good fermentation is that only your yeast is growing in there and there's no other bacteria or yeast growing in there. Well, at this phase, we're going to introduce live lactobacillus culture. This is all part of the sour mash process. So when the mash is at the right point, we will inoculate it with lactobacillus that will do their thing and make lactic acid and drop the pH. That has two benefits. One, it drives the mash into the right pH for the yeast, so obviously keeping the yeast happy and healthy. And secondly, there are very few microorganisms that can live in a pH below, like in that kind of 4 to 5 range. So it's sanitizing the mash for us, and then we'll refill the lactic can and save it for the next cook, and then we'll heat it up and kill all the lactic. So then it's ready for yeast. So when you tell people that you're going to be introducing live lactic and they've been working in distilleries that get contaminated with lactobacillus, like, oh shit, what are you doing? But it's one of those things like, this is how it was done back in the day, but we've got much better controls, much better understanding of the processes involved. And again, the sour mash process is all about keeping the yeast happy and healthy. So let's get away from this noisy thing. So, spoiler alert, this will not be my office. This will be kind of the signature conference room. So there will be a big U shape here, TVs there, ELT meetings, that type of stuff. These trees obviously were on the property when we bought it, and we were adamant that they were going to stay here. Why chop them down? We literally laid this out to keep them there. So it's a really good example of our focus on sustainability and all that type of stuff. So down through that way, we are going to plant tens of thousands of hardwoods. We will have a mixed hardwood forest. That was the other thing that Max and the family were adamant about. This will be the most sustainable distillery imaginable. Now, there's lots of wiggle room in there, but they did free up hundreds of thousands of dollars for sustainability stuff that really don't impact the cost of making whiskey or the quality of making whiskey. But we will have stormwater detention basins that are planted with native grasses. We're doing a lot of native grass plantings around the place. We'll have pollinator gardens. So if there is a storm, the water will collect in those and then seep slowly out instead of rushing off the property. Across the front here, we'll have some really cool landscaping, and off this corner, the space immediately below us will be the employee break room, and there'll be kind of a patio area out here with some big shade trees. So on a not too blistering hot day, you can go outside and have a nice break. We designed a lot of things in for like employee well-being. Sid's done a lot of work in mental health for hospitality people. And before we hired her, we'd actually built in 2 wellness rooms here. They started out as mother's rooms, and it was like, well, dad's kind of might need a moment too. So we've got 2 wellness rooms. So if an employee needs to go take 10 minutes, chill out, we've got that space built in. And that's the philosophy we're trying to build here. A very collaborative, empowered workforce that, I'm not going to be sitting in the corner office yelling edicts. It's like, let's work together on this. If you're a dick, you don't make good whiskey. So you can quote me on that. If you're a beep. But no, seriously, it shows up. If you don't care about what you're doing, and if you're a slave driver and all that kind of stuff, the whiskey's no good. And that's part of Heaven Hill's philosophy. We make great whiskey because we take care of our people. And it's kind of cool that we've been given the dollars and the elbow room to build things in like that. So,
how many total employees running the plant as well as other things will be on site here?
So on any given shift, it'll be Sid plus 2, and on day shift 2 mechanics, and the off shift 1 mechanic, and then distillery manager, QC, safety, and an HR person. So, but the HR initially will be split, but so very few. All right, it's hot in here. All right, so we're going to walk down the hallway here. This is all mechanicals, IT room, stuff like that. So we'll just breeze through that. 70 feet tall, 6 feet diameter. From that flange up, it's 100% copper because that's where all the alcohol is. From there down, there really isn't any alcohol in it, so it's all stainless. However, it is all insulated and wrapped with copper, so it looks like it's 100% copper, which is pretty cool. The thumper over there is 100% copper, so what happens is the beer comes in, and we've got options to put it in different trays. Steam comes in the bottom, distill it off the top, into the thumper. I think you turn that radio up. Into the thumper, vapors off the top. That tube there is the condenser, and from it, the new make whiskey will flow through what will be a very cool spirit safe here, and down to the product tank, to the distant loadout, to the system room, to the barrel. And still 2 will go there, still 3 will go there. So this is all future event space. Ultimately, we'll have tasting rooms here, and a bar, and a big event space, and you'll be able to get out on the patio and overlook the whole property from here. But that's probably a year or 2 away. But that's all this space was laid out for that type of thing. All right.
Operator room will go right here. So this will be my home. It's going to be all enclosed. You will find me in here. And that's where myself and the 2 others will be running.
When you say enclosed, is it going to be like glass wall where...
I believe...
Yeah, there will. You'll be able to see it.
So it's like the fish tank.
Right, you're like...
Yeah, There will be a sign, do not tap the glass.
Don't feed the animals.
Yeah.
Don't feed the distillery operators.
Yeah, so there will be a control room and lab up here, and the lab will be for Sydney and her team to go take in-process samples and check on it. So we've got kind of all the layers. We got the grain lab coming in for quality. We got the distiller's lab here for in-process testing. We got QC for the next level up, and then we got the R&D lab for forward-looking, future-looking stuff.
What's it look like to you when you walk through here? Are you excited?
I think it looks like the future. There's so much intentional design that has gone into this building. I'm really excited to just be a part of this really legacy project. I mean, we're going to be making outstanding whiskey in the very near future, but that whiskey is going to create such an incredible line of Heaven Hill products that will go well beyond my career. And that's really cool to be a part of on the ground floor.
Thanks to Heaven Hill's Conor O'Driscoll and Sydney Jones for the tour. I've posted photos from the tour on my Instagram feed and in the WhiskyCast community app. Full disclosure, I was a guest of Heaven Hill in Bardstown, but as with all of our content, full editorial control remains with WhiskyCast. That's WhiskyCast In-Depth, brought to you by Lagavulin, an award-winning single malt scotch from Islay, world-renowned for its balanced, smoky, peaty taste. Discover Lagavulin's full lineup at malts.com. I tasted all 3 expressions in Heaven Hill's new Grain to Glass collection this week, and let's start off the What I'm Tasting This Week department with the Grain to Glass Straight Bourbon. It's bottled at 53.5% ABV, and the nose has touches of caramel, honey, baked apples, and a hint of nutmeg. The taste has a good balance of spices and sweetness with black pepper and chili powder notes, complemented by red apples, honey, nutmeg, and vanilla. The finish, long and spicy. I'm scoring it a 93. Next up, the wheated bourbon, made from a mash bill of 52% corn, 35% wheat, and 13% malted barley, and bottled at 60.5% ABV. The nose has soft spices, a hint of fresh wheat bread, honey, maple, molasses, a soft nuttiness, and just a hint of oak. The taste has baking spices, oak tannins, molasses, roasted almonds, and a hint of anise. The finish is long with lingering spices and a touch of oak, and I'm scoring the Grain to Glass wheated bourbon a 93 as well. Finally, let's look at the Grain to Glass straight rye. This is what Heaven Hill calls a high rye mash bill of 63% rye, 24% corn, and 13% malted barley. It's bottled at 61.6% ABV, and the nose has dried flowers, toasted oak, molasses, and baking spices. The taste has baking spices in abundance, especially cinnamon and allspice, along with dried fruits and toasted oak. The finish is long and full of spices. I'm scoring the Heaven Hill Grain to Glass Straight Rye a 94. I'll be adding these tasting notes to our searchable list of more than 3,700 different whiskeys from all over the world. Check it out this week at whiskeycast.com.
Every year, Dewar's, the official Scotch whiskey of the U.S. Open Championship, rolls out a special limited edition whiskey to celebrate that year's tournament. The 2024 championship wrapped up in June, but the 2024 Dewar's 19-year Pinehurst edition is available now, and you don't want to miss it. This year's 19-year whiskey is double-aged, then extra-matured in rye casks, offering a rich profile with notes of pear and heather honey. There's a hint of spice in there, too, along with a dusting of cinnamon and cocoa powder. It's a sensory delight for any true whiskey or golf fan. So trust me, my fellow aficionados, grab a bottle and enjoy a whiskey crafted with the same skill and precision that makes the U.S. Open legendary. Please drink responsibly. Copyright 2024. Dewar's Blended Scotch Whiskey, 46% alcohol by volume. Imported by John Dewar & Sons, Coral Gables, Florida.
Let's open up the inbox and see what people are talking about this week. Our community segment is presented by Waterford Whiskey. My hashtag Hockey Dram series on social media ends Monday night with Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final between Edmonton and Florida. After I posted Friday night's Game 6 pick, the Wayne Gretzky Signature Rye, Dr. Don Livermore of the Hiram Walker Distillery asked my pick for the game on X. I've been picking the Oilers in 7 games since the final started, and I'm sticking with the Oilers. And Donald Hanna replied, "Time for a whiskey bet between Don and Mark?" Well, the problem with that is that I believe Don and I both agree on the Oilers in 7. So Donald replied, "I guess you'll have to bet on something else, perhaps which of you has the largest whiskey collection." No contest there. It's Don by a long shot when you count his extensive sample library. And Please Remain Calm asked, "What's the Game 7 dram going to be?" I haven't decided yet. It's, as they say, a game time decision. If you have something you'd like to share with whiskey lovers around the world, download the free WhiskyCast community app and join the conversation. You'll find it in your app store, and you can also find us on X, Threads, Instagram, and Facebook at WhiskyCast. The email address is comments@whiskeycast.com. Our community segment is presented by Waterford Whiskey on the web at waterfordwhiskey.com.
Every Irish single-farm origin gives completely different flavours when it's malted, fermented, distilled and matured. That's why we're exploring Irish terroir. Imagine how many flavours we find working with over 100 of them. Waterford Whiskey, the most naturally flavoursome single malt.
Let's close out the show now with Behind the Label, our look at the history, science, and people who make whiskey unique. It's brought to you by Balcones Distilling. I want to go back to the Heaven Hill Grain to Glass project for a moment because it allows us to talk about the role science plays in bourbon production. Growing corn for bourbon isn't as simple as buying a bunch of seed corn and planting it each spring. There's a lot of work that goes into selecting specific hybrid types, right down to fine-tuning the hybrid for the specific type of soil it's going into. Trek Murray of Beck's Hybrids supplies the seed corn for the Grain to Glass project.
So we go back to what we call the agronomics of the hybrid. So the disease characteristics, the ability to withstand thinner soils, the overall health of the plant and how it withstands the different practices that are done in that soil. So like the Peterson farms do a lot of no-till, and so certain hybrids that have better emergence, that work better in no-till. So we have to target all those different agronomic attributes that they're doing to make sure the hybrid fits that area the best.
How does this hybrid differ from regular yellow dent corn that we'd see in bourbon?
It's not really any different than most other bourbons, but it's bred for this area and fits this area very particularly. But it does have a higher starch content, a denser kernel that we prefer for some of the bourbons, and has that starch allows more alcohol in the fermentation process, so that's how it kind of works.
What does it mean to you to finally have this project in a bottle?
It's been really surreal. So it's been a 7-year process just to get it to that point. So it's just kind of been a long waiting game to make this all happen, and it's just exciting, right? To see all the work you put and come to fruition.
Each year's grain-to-glass crop is being grown using a slightly different hybrid of corn, making it possible to track individual differences in flavors from year to year. Thanks to Trek Murray of Beck's Hybrids for the explanation. And if you have something you'd like us to look at on an upcoming episode, just get in touch with us. Behind the Label is brought to you by Balcones Distilling, the original Texas whiskey at the forefront of the American single malt movement. Exploring place and provenance with unique style whiskeys ranging from the award-winning Texas One and Lineage American single malts to their Baby Blues straight corn whiskey and Texas Rye bottled in bond. Discover whiskey from a new perspective at balconesdistilling.com. That's all for this episode of WhiskyCast. You'll find links for the stories in this episode in our show notes at whiskycast.com. That's also where you'll find the latest whiskey news, my tasting notes, the calendar of events, the whiskey photo of the week, and, of course, a complete archive of past episodes going all the way back to 2005. Get in touch with us on X, Threads, Instagram, and Facebook at WhiskyCast, or you can use the WhiskyCast Community app. Download it today from the Apple and Google App Stores. Our email address is comments@whiskycast.com.
And now, a message from Robin Redbreast.
Ever go out drinking with a peacock? Always the same. Few too many, tail feathers come out. Drinks get knocked over, bartender's not happy, night's over before it started. All I'm saying is, don't be the peacock in your group.
Proud sponsor of WhiskyCast. Redbreast. Pass it on.
The 2024 release of Dewar's 19-Year-Old Champions Edition is out now. Available at Dewars.com. Get it while you can and appreciate every double-aged rye cask finished dram. Please drink responsibly.
WhiskyCast is a production of Cask Strength Media, copyright 2024, and comes to you from the charming, yet regrettably dry town of Haddonfield, New Jersey. I'm Mark Gillespie, reminding you that when you drink, please drink responsibly. Thanks for listening.